Ever felt like your hard work goes unnoticed? Like no matter how much you give, you're just another cog in the machine? I used to be that person. I gave it my all at a company that only saw me as replaceable. But when I stopped caring and let everything fall apart, something surprising happened, and it was the best decision I ever made. Stick around to hear why the best revenge isn't quitting in anger, it's finding peace. I got hired at a growing tech support company as a customer operations assistant. It seemed like a dream job at first: decent salary, a relaxed work environment, friendly coworkers, and flexible hours. The kind of role where you think, yeah, I could stay here a while. I was excited. I gave it my all from day one. I stayed late when needed, learned systems I wasn't even required to know, and stepped in whenever someone on the team needed help, even if it meant skipping lunch or answering emails after hours. At the time, I didn't mind. I thought it showed initiative. I thought it would lead to something, a recognition, growth, maybe even a raise. But a few months in, I started noticing the cracks. People started depending on me for things that weren't my responsibility. I'd come in on Monday morning and find that tasks from the weekend were left half done, or worse, untouched, with the expectation that I'd pick them up. Coworkers who had been friendly in the beginning slowly stopped asking for help and just started expecting it. "You're just better at that than me," they'd say, or "You're so quick with this stuff." I smiled it off at first, but deep down I started to feel it, the weight of being the go-to person, without any of the credit. One Friday, I stayed an extra 4 hours to fix a technical issue a senior team member had ignored all day. The client was angry, and I managed to fix it just in time. No thank you, no acknowledgement, just silence. That weekend, I got a message from my manager asking if I could quickly check something on a Saturday night. I responded out of habit, solved the issue, didn't even get a reply. By the time my next performance review came around, I felt confident. I'd kept things running smoothly, helped multiple departments, and even trained a new hire on tools I barely had time to learn myself. So when I brought up the idea of a raise or even some role support, I expected at least a conversation. Instead, my manager smiled politely and said, "You're doing great. Seriously, we appreciate you. But honestly, everyone here is replaceable." She said it like it was a fact, like I was a cog in a system, no different than the one before me or the one who'd come next. That one sentence hit harder than anything else I'd experienced at the company. I didn't argue. I didn't push back. I just nodded. But inside, something in me shut down. I realized then that no matter how much I gave, no matter how many late nights I worked or fires I put out, I'd always be just another one to them. That was the day I stopped trying. I didn't storm out or make a scene. I didn't announce anything dramatic. I just stopped caring. The work environment had already shown me that nothing I did would ever be enough to change the way they viewed me. I wasn't valued for my hard work. I wasn't appreciated for going above and beyond. So, I stopped going above and beyond. I made a decision that felt small at first, but in hindsight, it was a game changer. I would only do what was in my job description. Nothing more, nothing less. It started with simple changes. I stopped logging in early to get a head start on the day. I stopped staying late to clean up the messes that weren't mine to fix. And when the phone rang after hours, I let it ring. At first, it felt like a relief. I wasn't constantly burning myself out for a company that saw me as replaceable. But as the days passed, I noticed something interesting. No one seemed to notice the shift. No one asked why I wasn't volunteering for extra tasks or stepping in to help when things went wrong. At first, I thought maybe they had realized I deserved a break, but then things started to slip through the cracks. A customer got the wrong file. It wasn't a huge deal, but it was embarrassing. I had always been the one to double check files before sending them off, but this time I didn't. Someone else would fix it, and they did. But the client wasn't happy, and I could hear their frustration in the emails that followed. Then one of my teammates missed a major deadline on a project I had helped coordinate. Normally, I'd have stepped in, rearranged things, and made sure everything got back on track. But this time, I didn't. It wasn't my problem anymore. I didn't chase down the missing information or make last-minute adjustments. Someone else would do it, or they wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my issue. Slowly, I stopped seeing the constant flood of emails in my inbox. Not because the workload dropped, but because I stopped chasing people for answers. I stopped being the go-to person, the one who was always willing to help, the one who felt responsible for every little detail. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control of my own time. But I also started to notice that no one was asking where I was or why I wasn't fixing the little things anymore. It wasn't until those small, seemingly insignificant issues started adding up that I realized just how much I had been carrying before. The pressure that I had always felt, the constant need to put out fires, to smooth over every problem, to keep everything running perfectly, wasn't there anymore. But I didn't feel relieved. I felt indifferent. It was like a weight had been lifted, but in its place a quiet emptiness grew. Things were starting to unravel, and I was watching it happen, knowing it wasn't my responsibility anymore to fix it. And strangely enough, that was the most peaceful I'd felt in months. 2 weeks into my quiet quitting, things began to unravel. It started with small hiccups that nobody seemed to notice: missed deadlines, unanswered emails, overlooked tasks. But over time, the cracks in the foundation grew wider, and suddenly, everything I used to quietly fix in the background began to fall apart in plain sight. It wasn't long before my manager started scrambling. I could see the stress mounting on her face as she rushed around trying to put out fires that hadn't been dealt with in days. A major client, the one I had personally cultivated a strong relationship with, sent an email complaining about a delay in their order. It was a mistake I would have caught had I been my usual proactive self, but I didn't. I had stopped. The next morning, a supervisor escalated a support ticket that had been sitting unanswered for 3 days. It was a simple issue, but without my usual attention to detail, no one had followed up with the customer. The situation could have been fixed in an hour if someone had stepped in, but no one had. The email thread between my team and the client had grown longer, and with every additional back and forth, it became harder to resolve. I could hear the faint tension in the office, like the quiet hum of something breaking just beneath the surface. My coworkers, the ones who had once relied on me to cover their mistakes and pick up their slack, now seemed to be struggling to stay afloat. Tasks were piling up, systems were being neglected, and productivity was dropping. But the interesting part? Nobody said anything. No one asked where I was. No one asked why I wasn't taking charge like I used to. One afternoon during a team meeting, my manager asked the group, "Why are we falling behind? Why are things slipping through the cracks?" I sat there quietly for a moment. I could feel the weight of the question, the tension in the room. Everyone seemed uncomfortable, but no one had the answer. My teammates shifted in their chairs, avoiding eye contact. I knew they were thinking it, just like I was. It was because I wasn't picking up the slack anymore, but no one dared to say it out loud. Finally, the words left my mouth without me even thinking about it. "Maybe it's time you hired someone who isn't replaceable." The room fell silent. I didn't look at anyone. I just stared at my manager. Her face hardened, but she didn't respond immediately. After a long, awkward pause, she just nodded. In that moment, I realized that my absence had highlighted a truth none of us had wanted to face. The system was built on the assumption that someone would always step in and pick up the pieces, that someone was always me. But now, I wasn't doing it anymore, and everything was beginning to show. The delicate balance I'd been maintaining, one that no one had acknowledged, was finally tipping over, and I was watching it happen. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel proud. I felt indifferent. This was what I had been silently dealing with for months, and now it was all out in the open. It didn't take long for things to shift after the cracks had started showing. As the situation grew more chaotic, I started getting check-in messages from my manager. At first, it was casual. "How are you feeling about your role?" she asked in a text one afternoon. I didn't respond right away, letting the message linger in my inbox, unsure of what to say. After all, how was I supposed to answer that? I wasn't feeling anything in particular about my role anymore. I had stopped caring. The next message came a day later. "Is there anything you need from us to make your work easier?" It was almost laughable. Here I was, burnt out from covering everyone else's messes for months, and now they were asking if I needed help. My initial instinct was to point out the obvious, that I had been asking for support all along. But I didn't bother. I had already figured out that nothing would change no matter how much I spoke up. They had shown me what they valued. It wasn't me. It was just the work, the results, the output. I wasn't indispensable. I was just a cog in a machine. Then came the final straw, a promotion offer. My manager scheduled a one-on-one to discuss my future with the company. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and desperation, and said, "We've been thinking about this, and we'd like to offer you a lead position. You've always done such a great job managing the team, and we think it's time for you to step up." I almost laughed in her face. The position was something I'd asked for 6 months earlier, when I'd felt like I was carrying the weight of the team on my shoulders. I had been brushed off then, told I wasn't ready, that the team needed someone with more leadership potential. I'd heard all the excuses. And now, when things were falling apart and everyone was scrambling to keep the ship afloat, they were suddenly interested in giving me a leadership role. It was almost too late, but I guess that's how it always works in a toxic environment, right? They don't care until it's too late. I smiled politely, nodded, and said nothing for a moment. The offer hung in the air between us, almost like a test. "I appreciate it," I said finally. "But I'm not interested anymore. I've already seen what I mean to this company." Her face fell slightly. She tried to cover it up with a forced smile, but I could see the disappointment. The realization that maybe they had taken me for granted too long. But it was too late. I was done. I wasn't angry. I wasn't upset. I had just stopped caring about a place that had shown me in so many ways that I wasn't valued. I walked out of that meeting knowing one thing. I was done giving more than I was getting. They had their chance. I'd given them my best, and now it was time to move on. A month after that conversation, I handed in my notice. There were no dramatic goodbyes, no office gossip. I just sent a simple email to my manager stating that I was resigning, with the usual "thank you for the opportunity" and a note about helping with the transition. I made sure to give proper notice, offered to assist in training someone else, and ensured there were no loose ends. No hard feelings, no grudges, just a clean, quiet exit. It wasn't as satisfying as I thought it might be. There were no cheers or applause, no grand farewell. But the weight that lifted off my shoulders as I clicked send was the best feeling I'd had in months. It was like stepping out from under a heavy cloud and into clear skies. I didn't rush into another job either. I took my time. I didn't need to jump back into a toxic work environment, and I wasn't desperate to find another position that would just demand everything from me without giving anything in return. I knew I deserved better than that. So I looked for something that truly aligned with what I valued, a role where my contributions were recognized, where boundaries were respected, and where people actually appreciated the work I did. Now, I work with a small, fully remote team. We collaborate from different parts of the world, but we share the same values: respect, understanding, and trust. It's a completely different dynamic. My manager checks in regularly, but it's always about support, never about micromanaging. My colleagues give me credit when I contribute something meaningful, and I do the same for them. There's no competition, no one stepping on each other's toes, and no one feeling like they have to prove something. It's not perfect, but it's real, and it's built on mutual respect. And most importantly, I can take a break when I need one, without the fear that everything will fall apart. I don't have to stay up late answering emails or take on tasks that aren't mine to begin with. I don't have to be the person everyone turns to just because I've always been the one to fix everything. I work hard, but I don't sacrifice my peace for it anymore. Sometimes the best revenge isn't quitting in anger or making a scene. It's just moving on quietly, taking your skills, your value, and your peace with you. It's about building a life that doesn't require you to give everything for the sake of others' comfort. And in my case, it was about proving that I wasn't replaceable, just not in the way they thought. Now, I can look back and say I made the right choice. I didn't let the job define me. I didn't let the company's lack of respect for my time and energy wear me down. And in the end, I found a place that values who I am, not just what I can do. Sometimes the best revenge really is peace, and I finally have that. I hope you enjoyed this story and found it relatable. If you did, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more real life stories and experiences like this one. Thanks for watching.